Here I am in Ardingly Wood. This is an area of the Weald Forest, very ancient woodland. Actually at one time part of the UK's largest continuous woodland, since been cleared due to sort of modernisation, deforestation, farming, all the rest. But it's a very interesting area. The landscape that we've come to look at essentially is part of the Long Chalk escarpment that runs through the south of England, and in the back here we can already begin to see some of these rocky forms that come out of the forest, and what we actually get along this chalk ridge are sandstone outcrops, natural outcrops, and I've come down here to show you that. As you can see and hear, there's a natural spring that runs through the area. We're reaching springtime in terms of the time of year, and so the spring is starting to come up again. Shows that there would have been a water source in this area for people that might have inhabited the area in the past. Around 40 million years ago, this entire area was under the ocean, covered in a huge chalk dome. The ocean eroded the dome and left this sandstone cliff face jutting out of the land, and we've come to look in particular at this rock formation, which in my opinion is one of the UK's best kept secrets. This is Biggar Pond Little. It's a huge sandstone boulder, and we can see it stands entirely on this much smaller platform. So it's a huge boulder, big upon a much smaller platform, and there's actually a line of separation along here. So those are two distinct stone formations, and we can see Biggar Pond Little has been severed from the main throng of the cliff face at some point where the ocean levels have risen high enough to sever it. This is an extremely interesting series of rock formations. We end up with these kind of pathways where the ocean has carved out the stone. Very convenient for people if they wanted to later use these as rock shelters. Up on the top of the cliff face there's an extremely interesting carving. We have a kind of half diamond shape and a full diamond shape, and in the middle there's actually a cross. Now this cross indicates north, east, south and west. It's nearly midday now, not too far off, and we can see the sun up here almost directly along this line that this cross makes. So again, north, east, south and west. So this seems to be an orientation symbol, showing the orientation of the land and the cliff face here. I think this is evidence, I think this is an ancient symbol, and I think this is evidence of an ancient culture that inhabited these cliffs and used them as rock shelters. We're back around at the front face of Biggar Pond Little. You can get some idea here of the size of the boulder. It's huge. So this face would be facing south, and we can see this channel along the front here. It's obviously been carved out by water. The implication would be that where sea levels have risen enough to sever Biggar Pond Little here from the cliff face behind, the water's flowed over the top, and as the tide's gone out, the water's drained away from the top and has run down the front here and carved this out. That would be the natural kind of explanation for this channel here. But I want to kind of show you it and make note of it, because it seems to bear some significance to one of the other stones that we've come to look at here today, called the Executioner Stone, that has some pretty interesting features. Just before we take a look at the Executioner Stone, I just wanted to show you this rock face. It's literally several feet just to the east of Biggar Pond Little. This is Biggar Pond Little here, but we have this another carving on the rock, these two X carvings. These could of course be modern, but these X symbols are also found on cave walls as part of rock art. They're found on pillars, orthostats, on upright megalithic monuments. These kind of etched markings that almost form these kind of lozenge shapes are kind of synonymous perhaps with an ancient, in my opinion, navigational culture. These are to do with navigation, they're to do with understanding the land, they're also to do with understanding time and space. Another carving here on Biggar Pond Little, which kind of forms a semicircle. Again, this would be something that I might associate with concepts to do with the sun, to do with the horizon, to do with the azimuth and altitude, and the variation in the movement of the sun over the course of the year in relation to the landscape. So here we are at the Executioner Stone. This name was actually, it's kind of been adopted from the Victorian era. This whole site was an attraction during the Victorian era, and for that reason this stone's actually in some ways dismissed by archaeologists as a potential Victorian folly, but I think that's really highly doubtful. You've got these steps that run up the side of the stone and this channel that runs down the front of the stone, and this is an extremely interesting channel. How smooth the channel runs, it almost has an unnatural appearance. Coupled with these steps, it is really interesting. And when we take a look at this huge boulder and how it's situated against the landscape, it becomes even more curious. We have that huge channel that runs down the front of this boulder, but if we look behind the boulder, it's just an open landscape. These trees 40 million years ago, when this boulder, when water would have been here, when the ocean level was high enough to carve that channel out, these trees of course wouldn't have been here. So there's nothing behind this boulder that would have allowed that channel to be carved out. Well, the channel's facing the coast. These are the other cliffs. So when the tide was going out, how would it have defied gravity to have made this channel? Doesn't quite make sense. Perhaps this channel is artificial. Perhaps people climbed up these steps, as I'm doing now, to pour water down this channel as a kind of votive offering. Perhaps this is an altar stone, an ancient altar stone. Perhaps the channel in Biggar Pond Little is also man-made. Perhaps people also poured liquid down the front of Biggar Pond Little. With the rock art that we've seen on top of the cliff face, that seems to have some kind of esoteric symbol with a cross in the middle, obviously seeming to indicate cardinal directions. We're building up a picture of a culture that perhaps has ritual symbolic associations with customs to do with the landscape and the sky, and uniting the land and the sky and the activities of the sky, and primarily the sun. Now, it's a bit of a shame that it's a cloudy day, but it's about midday right now, and the sun is just here behind this tree. We can see its light just about coming through. That means the sun's at due south right now because it's midday, and it's right over this channel, just behind that tree. So this channel actually marks the north-south meridian for this location quite successfully, and that can be checked with a compass. If it was a sunnier day, the light would be coming down this channel right now, and I've been here later on in the year, and obviously the higher the sun is, the more towards summer, the more the light's going to reach down toward the end of this channel. And so this rock would also work almost like a calendar. When the sun's lower in the sky, it's not going to clear as much of this channel. When it's higher in the sky, it's going to clear more of it, and that would indicate roughly what time of year it is. I believe we're dealing with cultures from prehistory, Stone Age cultures, even troglodyte cultures, practically living in caves, rock shelters, but still extremely sophisticated in terms of their understanding of the landscape and nature, and their geophysical awareness was in some ways perhaps as sophisticated as, if not more so, than the average person today. If we check the alignment with a magnetic compass, we get pretty convincing north to south alignment. Here's a closer look at the channel on the Executioner stone. This so smooth here, almost has the appearance of having been machine worked, but we can assume this is caused by fluid running down it. The question is, did that occur naturally or unnaturally? If it occurred naturally, how do we explain the channel facing toward the coast? How do we explain the process that causes large enough volume of water at a large enough, constant enough rate to carve out this channel with nothing behind it that could allow the water to run down the face of the stone? It seems that people cause that to happen by climbing up these steps and pouring fluid down this channel over so many generations until they ended up with this monument. So just behind the Executioner stone, so to the south of it, we have this other boulder that forms a very interesting shape in itself. Almost has kind of sphinx-like quality to it, and the two boulders here, the Executioner stone and this opposing boulder, kind of flank either side of this open way sort of track that runs through the middle. They almost give the appearance of kind of entrance stones, and perhaps they were kind of viewed that way, entrance stones into the kind of kingdom that was this ancient prehistoric rock shelter dwelling. Here we have more of the cliffs that run off toward the north here. These could all have been potential rock formations that could have been modified and turned into shelters. It doesn't take a lot to imagine building roof from one face to the other, blocking some of this off to make them habitable for long-term or short-term dwelling. these passageways through the rocks almost form streets. These channels, you can see the potential use of this landscape by ancient people. Here we have another enclosed area, enclosed by the cliffs here. This would make a very convenient camp. You'd kind of be defended on one side, but also it would be a convenient area to run animals, game into. They'd be potentially blocked by these cliffs. You could have people situated on the top with spears that would take down the animals. Or alternatively, in a previous era, if some of these trees were cleared, you might run animals the other way and off the top. These are high enough to cause significant injury to a small animal if it's to be run off the top of it. Here we have another really good example of one of the kind of enclosed spaces that's kind of formed just naturally by the position of these sandstone boulders, that would be extremely convenient to turn into a habitat. If you were an ancient human, you've got a kind of doorway here that leads out, looks down this hill that drops off down here. You can see all the graffiti from past eras. This is obviously more modern graffiti, but you would walk back into this kind of sheltered area here. You could obviously, using wood, build a kind of roof kind of structure up there if you really wanted to, and you get this kind of walkway that leads back out into this more open area where you've got more of the cliff face that bends round. Here I wanted to show you one of the caves. There are two caves in the area. This is one of them, and there's actually evidence of human occupation, or at least use of this cave. Stone tools have been found in here, so there's pretty solid evidence that this area was used and occupied in the ancient past. The question is to what extent. I believe currently the significance of the Big upon Little site is poorly understood and really quite underappreciated. I think we've got two ritualistic type altar stones that display evidence of human carving, and I believe there are several carvings in the area that are of ancient origin. So I believe this area is actually perhaps one of the UK's best kept secrets in terms of interest in megalithic prehistoric sites. It's Big upon Little in the Ardingly Wood in the area of the Weald, the Chalk Ridge, along the Chalk Ridge in the south of England. Got the light on in the cave to try and give you a bit of a better look, idea of its size. It isn't huge. This wouldn't be a massive space for people to live in, but it would certainly make a convenient shelter, temporary shelter if weather got bad enough, or if you needed to store extremely important items that you wanted to seal off somehow by covering or guarding this entranceway. This would be very convenient for that. So perhaps if shelter did exist, or a larger, more large-scale community did exist in this area, consisting of rock shelters formed amongst the boulders in the cliff face there, and perhaps this cave and the other cave that's over more toward the east of the site, perhaps they were used to guard or protect more important items, or for some kind of purpose like that, perhaps storing the bones of ancient ancestors. I'm not sure how much these have been excavated, and I'm not entirely sure at this stage whether any human remains have ever been found around the site, but I know there's definitely evidence of an encampment over one side, with the evidence of a kind of earthwork that would have formed an ancient wall. Here again we have more examples of the water source. Flows stronger down here as well, flows from the higher ground this way, but this natural water source obviously could have been utilised by the people in the ancient past in their kind of ritual ceremonies, in which they poured water over these rocks of obviously social, spiritual significance to them, in a tradition that unites the sky, the sun, the land and water, in a tradition that can be passed from generation to generation. And I believe sites like this, Big Upon Little, in which there are obvious rock shelters that could have been used and perhaps were used for shelter. People dwelled in these kind of spaces and eventually moved out from these kind of spaces into the open fields, moving into the Mesolithic, Neolithic era, but they took stones with them. The sandstone that we find here is the same sandstone that we find all over the south of England, erected as megalithic structures, and those megalithic structures are also to do with that same principle of understanding and uniting the land, the sky, understanding the cardinal directions, understanding the seasons, the year, time on both an annual and daily sense, and that is the main basis of the research that I like to conduct, ancient horology. You can find out a lot more about some of my ideas relating to this kind of stuff, also more ideas relating to Stonehenge, and the Neolithic, megalithic landscape of Wiltshire and the south of England. You can check those out on my YouTube channel, and if you like what you've seen here, please share it with other like-minded people.